Greetings. This is Gillie Priest of Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio. It's maybe approximately 2 weeks now since I have done a broadcast, and that was mainly attributed to the fact that I was asked to perform some volunteer work at a union by the name of Tankor that is based at 6th East Parade. That is right there down by Sutton Street and Church Street. So I went there to do some volunteer work, and I plan to continue doing some volunteer work whenever the time is available. Now let me tell you something little about this union. It is a union organized under the laws that govern unions in Jamaica, just like the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union or the Norman Washington Manley Trade Union. But this union is a little bit more geared towards assisting people who are both employed and unemployed. And this Tankor union, whenever you become a member of that union, you are given certain rights. They will help you with legal representation. They will help you to secure unsecured loans, meaning that you have no collateral to put up or you have no record showing that you are a person who will always pay back the loan whenever you have a clean record. So they help with a lot of things. They help out with getting your documents in order, regardless of what type of documents you need assistance with. They are there to assist you. And they are also seeking other volunteers to come in and volunteer in whichever way they can. So I'm taking this opportunity to say to you, the public here in Jamaica, that whoever can volunteer some time or some resources or whatever to the Tankor Union, you are welcome to do so. It will be highly appreciated. And again, it is based at 6 East Parade, almost at the corner of Sutton Street and Church Street. Now, like I've been stating on several programs before, I have also incorporated a for-profit organization by the name of Force by Time Limited. And it is through this organization I intend to use as the vehicle to advance my dreams and aspirations, both as an individual and as a member of a collective, meaning that the struggling masses, whichever way we can use this for-profit organization to move the struggle forward to accomplish certain things. That is my intent. Over the past week, I was able to establish an account for Forge by Time Limited, and it's a part of the procedure in Jamaica with the banking system. Whenever you are dealing with a for-profit corporation, I cannot speak in terms of non-profit organization, but for-profit, you are required to open two accounts. One, a Jamaican denomination account, and one, a foreign currency denomination account. So I was able to establish both accounts, have them approved, and I was issued the account numbers. So that's another accomplishment. The last broadcast I did, it surrounded dealing with crimes in Jamaica. And part of this endeavor of this corporation that was established to help address the issue of crime in Jamaica, but to address it from a non-traditional perspective, to address it from a perspective where people who tend to commit certain types of crime will more easily understand and appreciate the approach that Forge by Time will be taking. Now that we have established Forge by Time Limited, which will also not only undertake my desire to do some tourings and lecturing, and to do that, to accomplish that through Forge by Time Limited, but I also intend to use that corporation to advance a program to deal with juvenile delinquency in Jamaica, as well as to deal with overall crime and violence from a non-traditional approach. All right. In terms of the seminary, the Promise Key, the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary, that is also a part of the program. And one thing I want everyone to envision is that all these different undertakings that I'm being involved with and involved in they all ultimately is a subsidiary of Forged by Time Limited. To say that another way, every single thing that I undertake or will undertake in the future will be coming up under Forged by Time Limited. Now, let me say something upon the tour thing. I had made an appeal several broadcasts ago, asking individuals in different countries, as well as in different parts of Jamaica, to reach out to the Gillie Rastafari Radio and share with me, how do you believe you can play a part in the tour, in this Rastafari lecture tour, this liberation lecture tour I desire to undertake sometime in the coming year, right? And what I'm particularly looking for is for people who live in different countries and in different parts of those countries to help coordinate, to reach out to organizations that exist in their countries and in their community and see if they could coordinate the whole enterprise as it pertains to their particular country, the particular country in which they live. So once I can get 4, 5, 6 different countries, more or less, and then I'll be able to coordinate a tour in terms of the booking and the traveling and the lodging and the fees and all. I'll be able to better coordinate everything through the Forged by Time Limited Corporation. So that's one objective. The Rastafari Promise Key Seminary is on track. I've made certain contact. I've received an itinerary of email address to most of the Rastafari organization in Jamaica and the auxiliary in foreign country. And at the present moment, I'm having a general email draft up to send out to all this to kind of let them know I'm here, I'm willing to participate, I like to participate, and to kind of to see if we can bring the agendas together, more centralize the agenda to see where I can fit in or where I cannot fit in, then the role I would play, whether in or out of these particular organization. Now, as you will see, I'm always on the objective of trying to get the books, Forged by Time, and this is my main source of income. So I've always reached out to the brethren and sisters, subscribers who listen to this program and ask you to continue support. I appreciate the fact that you have already begun supporting me. I've seen it reflected in the numbers, and I really appreciate that very much. And I will consistently ask for your support. It's well appreciated. Thank you very much. Also, you can see right here the numbers, phone number where Forged by Time can be contacted. And once you contact Forged by Time Limited, you'll be able to speak to me or someone who is assisting at the present moment, because at the present moment, I've not been able to accumulate funds in order to set up the required executive administrative body to run this organization. So I'm kind of getting volunteer help also. So while I'm volunteering to assist the Tanko Union, I am also getting volunteer from some to help me put together more efficiently and more precisely the Forged by Time Limited Corporation. So those volunteers that's coming in is well appreciated. Now I want to say one more thing. I'm reaching out to individuals. One of the things we want to establish, get clear, because that is what has been made known to me since my return to Jamaica. And it's basically the same thing all over the world. It's two ways you can deal with the system. You can deal with the system through the appropriate channels that is laid down by the system, follow rules and procedures and everything, and hope that you accomplish that which you seek out to accomplish, whether you are going through government agencies, dealing with rules, regulations, and stuff like that. But there's another facet to this society and all other society, and that is what we refer to in Jamaica as links. Links are really around the place. You need to know people who know people who know people. And that is one of the process where I'm going through now, is trying to make certain links so I can better smooth the path. Nothing illegal. Just knowing people who know people who can who can endorse certain programs that you're coming with. And like the program that I'm coming with dealing with crime and violence and delinquency, I need to get into the prison system. I want to be able to visit all the prisons in Jamaica, all of them, male and female, including juveniles, reformatories, and able just to get a feel of the place, see the people, converse with the incarcerated people, converse with those who are administrating these institutions, so I can get a better feel of what it's like in those institutions in Jamaica. So once I began to tailor the program to those institutions, that tailoring will be based on a more correct perception of the reality than what I brought with me from the United States. Because it's not going to be the same. Some things going to be the same, but there are going to be things that are drastically different, where the incarcerated and the prisoners have different needs and different desires, and they are certainly going to express themselves differently. Right? And so far I have contacted the Ministry of Justice, I have contacted the Ministry of Security, I have contacted the Department of Corrections in Jamaica, and they have acknowledged receiving my email to them, expressing my desire to get into this place, but I still haven't heard from them going over 2 months now. So the realization that I basically come to is that I need to contact people or make contact with people who are already allowed to visit the system, so they can better explain to me how to go about, how to navigate that process to get into the system, or they can even add me to their itinerary, their approval list in order to get me in. So that's one of the process that I'm going through right now. And because of that, the main thing that I was supposed to be really focusing on right now is the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. But because I was asked to do volunteer work, I was asked to give my opinion on crime and violence in Jamaica. At the present moment, I'm being pulled in many different directions, where people would like me to add my voice to those issues that are basically priority to them. But for me right now, I kind of feel that I'm positioned that way where I already have the Forged by Time Limited Corporation established. I already have the accounts established. I already, one more thing, I've already gotten the proof for the seal, and the seal for the corporation was also established. So you will both see the seals of what the corporation, that was what was used to seal and certify the certificate and the bank account for the Forged by Time Limited Corporation. So there are 2 main things that I'm concentrating on right now, dealing with my basic priorities. Being able to set up a tour dealing with Rastafari lectures and African liberation lectures, and to deal with the crime and violence. Those are my 2 number 1, number 2 priorities right now, dealing with Forged by Time Limited. Everything else is just for a minute. Everything else is what you use the term ad hoc, just a temporary basis. When I venture into something, it's not really to take it up and carry it, but just to add my voice to it, contribute to it, volunteer to it, and then let it go and keep moving on. Give what I can give, and what I cannot give, then so be it. Now, I'm going to touch upon a thing now before I go in today, and today I intend to go back and read some more from the capstone, from the thesis dealing with the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. But there's one thing I'd like to touch upon before I segue into that. And it is this. All nations and race and people upon the face of the earth are fighting for true liberation. And if every people are fighting for true liberation, and they have historically defined their liberation within the context of freeing their own particular people from the trials and tribulation that they are presently facing, or what they may have been facing in the past and what they will face in, it is always narrowed down to liberation for themselves and their people. Now we know that there are going to be collateral consequences and auxiliary benefits. Others will also benefit from the liberation. When Chairman Mao and his cadres liberated China, we are able to see the effect today of that liberation, where that liberation struggle, though it was centralized based upon liberating the Chinese people, different people of the world are benefiting from it, economically, politically. So what we are saying is that there is no contradiction in people saying they are fighting for their own liberation. And that is one of the things I want to touch upon today when you're talking about black people. We have been the most oppressed and exploited people that ever existed upon the face of this earth. And therefore, our central priority should and must be the liberation of our people. There is this movement that's taking place in the world where those who have oppressed other nations and other people upon this face of the earth for centuries, now that they are coming to this realization that the death grip that they once had the world's peoples in no longer exists, that it cannot continue. We have noticed a sudden rise throughout the world of international ethics and international morality and worldwide humanity, where it is basically saying where there was at one time when Europe commanded all the resources of the world unto themselves, all the academic scholarship unto themselves, justifying their own action. Every facet of faculty of human development were bent to the service and the security of Europe and European. Today, when they have come to the realization that that world can no longer exist, that that world will no longer be tolerated, we have noticed the sudden rise of a universal concept now, where everything in this world belongs to everybody, where we should all fight to free everybody, even when we ourselves are not free. And it compels us to stop and ask, where does this universalism come from? Whose purpose does this universality serve? How can we, who are a people and members of the African race, who are still under oppression and exploitation, take up this mantle and say our number one priority is to free the world? How did that become our number one priority when we ourselves are under the guns? That's something to think about. And what I've noticed, a lot of the Rastafari brethren them now, that is the doctrine they have adopted. They have adopted this universalism in which they have lost their particular and entire struggle as applicable to the African race is no longer central in their desire and in their action. It is not about all humanity. Whereas we know that the other races and other nations and other people and they are concentrated on their own particular liberation. We are the only people who are not free, who are running around and talking about freeing the world. That cannot be our central tenet. We know that true liberation will liberate the world. We know that. We know that true liberation is indivisible from the liberation of others. We know that. So that is not in dispute. What I am disputing is that we as the African race should not take up this mantle and centralize in our struggle the universal liberation of humanity when we ourselves as a particular people are under the guns of every other nation and race upon the face of the earth. And I'm going to show you a simple mathematics, a simple thing. Europe was built and sustained by the resources of Africa and the manpower labor of Africa. Europe today, as it was yesterday, is at the realization that the freedom of the African people and the liberation of Africa will lead to their own economic and political demise. Therefore, it is not in their interest economically, politically, spiritually, physically, it is not in their interest to advocate for the liberation of Africa and the African people. That same mathematical equation equally applies to China. It equally applies to India. It equally applies to what they call to the other nations of the South. Now, this does not mean that we should not form alliances with the nations of the South. This does not mean we should not have diplomatic, political, and economic relations with all the nations, with all of the other nations of the world. What we must come to the recognition as a people is that all nations or people are fighting to liberate themselves. And if the world benefits, then so be it. But the key factor I want to reiterate to the brethren and sisters listening to this: China cannot advance without access to Africans and to Africa. India cannot advance without access to Africa and the Africans. And the same mathematics apply to Europe. So we must learn how to approach these nations and these people, because we know that they fully recognize that the truly liberated and emancipated Africans and of Africa does not bode well for them, because the entire resources that all these nations need and the buying power that these nations needs externally, some more than some, lays with Africa, which as one of the youngest, if not the youngest population in the world. We will be the biggest consumer upon the face of this earth if we have not that already. So where does this dependency lay? No. In all truth and fact, we have no dependency on them. They are the ones who have the dependency on us. They need our labor. They need our purchasing power. They need our resources. So where does this argument come from that we are fighting this humanitarian universal principle for liberation, when the outside world, those external of us, are within the full recognition that their liberation depends upon our subjugation? Those are all reality, brothers and sisters. We're going to have to figure out. We're going to have to sieve it out. So yes, by other nations are rising, because the G7, you understand, those European nations that would not allow any other non-European to become members of more than spectators, their economic power has been declining over the last 15, 20 years, where that economic and political body is no longer the strongest political and economic body in the world, made up of all white people. They are all presently shaking in their boots now because of BRICS. Those nations that are made up basically of people of the southern hemisphere, but also include other people who have seen themselves oppressed, who may have not been specifically, demographically, or geographically within the South, but they identify with the South politically and economically based upon exploitation and subjugation and colonial exploitation. So that is the position that we are in as African. We must centralize ourselves and centralize our own liberation within the core of our responsibility. Stop removing the African liberation concept and trying to replace it with this universal morality, ethical concept. Because those other people in the world do not centralize this universal doctrine within their priority. No. India is fighting for the liberation of India. China is fighting for the liberation of China. Europe is fighting to maintain its dominance within the world, economic and political. The black man is the only man around when boy man free the whole world. And he's taking that position from the most ridiculous stance where he's at, because he himself is not liberated. Or you gonna cut the grass in our next man's yard and you don't cut the grass in your yard? What type of nonsense is that? Now another thing I want to touch upon, and this I deal more specifically with the Rastafari movement. When 45 years ago, when I was imprisoned in the United States, when I was first imprisoned in the United States, the central tenet, as I can recall, of the Rastafari movement, especially for the virgins I was around at 53 Last Street, the Rastafari Movement Association, and I also affiliate with other organizations. The central tenet of the Rastafari movement was African liberation and the liberation of African people. 45 years later when I returned, you know what I say? Every man I try to go to heaven. It's like the liberation of the people and the liberation of the old man is no longer central to the Rastafari movement. It's all about who can fight through the gate for getting a heaven on an individual basis, which is really an extension of the doctrine of Christendom theology, where every man is unto himself to get into heaven somewhere in the sky. So when I return now, I return and see this powerful religiosity force deeply embedded now within the Rastafari movement, where it's like them going back to the days of Pocomania. Up here jumping and shouting and save me Lord God and gone to heaven. I have not seen or heard where any Rastafari organs is speaking and addressing the liberation of the African people and of the African continent. I've yet to hear one. Sometimes when I scroll the internet or scroll certain media, it's just some enchantment with what them calling them personal salvation. And the most hurtful aspect about it is to say the future generation, the kids, the young generation, 5, 6, 7-year-old, is being indoctrinated into this individual salvation thing, what has taken over the Rastafari movement. Like what one virgin said to me, Rasta have lost his way. No one then you may hear a virgin give a little lip service to liberation in Africa. Or you may hear it in a song. But when you look on what is centralized to these individual Rastafari, or what is centralized within these different organs, is about personal, individual salvation. Every man a fight for himself to go somewhere we call Zion. Not knowing that this individual fight for getting to that mythical Zion cannot liberate us. Where is the collective movement within Rastafari to liberate the African race and liberate the African continent and liberate Africans wherever we may find ourselves upon the face of this earth? Because don't forget, I tell you one time, this earth is ours and we're not giving none of it. Any ground upon which we stand is ours to be liberated. So that is the thing that where I notice I've created this great shift within the Rastafari movement. It is no longer about the liberation of the African people and the African continent. It is not about individual salvation. Who can act like Moses more than who else? Who can act more righteous than the next man? Who can eat more idle food than the next man? Who can live longer than everything is about now the individual? And that's Rasta come to know. 45 years later when we return, it's a different so-called movement, this. Different so-called movement. And these are issues that has to be addressed. the individualization of the Rastafari movement and the centralization within the movement now, well, is all about a universalism. Those two things is what right now are cripple the Rastafari movement. And we have to get away from it. This universal doctrine, this desire to free humanity when you yourself is nonsense. Like I said, freedom is indivisible. You cannot separate freedom. I understand that. But I also understand that as I fight for my freedom, the world will benefit from the fact that I am fighting for my freedom. But every nation, every people must take up their own mantle. And when we meet at the table to create a universalism in the future, is when we must be freed ourselves. But the Rastafari movement, I cannot address or speak to how or why it was taken over. I wasn't here. I was journeying within myself for 45 years, journeying within myself, while on the without, the Rastafari movement was being captivated by a different concept. How can we speak of Rastafari in this time, in 2024, when there is no global movement, when Rastafari does not represent a potent force to shake up this world? Are you talking about basically within this dispensation? Rastafari been here from the beginning of time. But within this dispensation, we can speak of, say, okay, 100 years. Where are we 100 years after the commencement of the movement? Where are we? Yes, you can point to individuals within the movement who have made certain material progress, and that is good. And that should be encouraged. But that cannot be the central tenet of the movement, where each and every individual has to go and fend for himself, and believing that by the individual is fending for his or herself, that represents the movement. That does not represent the movement, that represents the individual. Though the movement may benefit from the progress of the individual, but let's not confuse it. So we're talking about now the cadreism, and that is essential to moving the movement forward. And essential to moving the movement forward is an economic base, because we shall not get anywhere without a collective economic base to propel us forward. So that is essential. And that is one of the main reasons why I established the Forged by Time Limited Corporation. Not only to make my own personal economic advancement, but to use it as a vehicle to advance the Rastafari movement, to advance the Black liberation movement. That is one of my principles in establishing it. And one of the hardcore things that I want to involve in, I've already spelled it out, is dealing with crime and violence in this society. Because I am convinced the approach that has been made by the rules of this society to deal with that not going away. That is not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, I have already pointed that the society benefit from crime and violence, and the lower class of people benefit from crime and violence. So let's not go around this thing. Now, where I left off the last time, I was dealing with the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. And I've been reading from this document here. This is a thesis capstone that I had submitted to the New York Theological Seminary while in pursuit of my master's degree in urban theology and counseling. And I've been reading from it over a period of time. And I would like to take this opportunity now, since I basically did some house cleaning, I've touched upon the various different things that I wanted to really touch upon. And then I want to, because this document has to be completed before I actually commence the philosophical teachings where I want to use to shape and guide the worldwide Rastafari and liberation cadre movement throughout the world. But we have to get into the reason. We must understand the reason and purpose for things. And if we are lacking an understanding in the reason and purpose for things, then to a certain degree we are being led blindly. And that is one of the things where we as Rastafari don't want to get involved in. Just looking for loyal. We're not looking for no followers. That's the first thing. Rastafari is about developing leader where every individual, man, woman and pitney can lead themselves, but still within an organizational structure. So I'm going to read some of this so we can move this thing forward now, dealing with the Rastafari Promise Key Seminar, the reason and purpose why we're establishing it. It said, for centuries, Africans were dispossessed of the fullness of their ancient doctrinal and spiritual practices and imbued with the most diabolical doctrinal interpretation of other people's exegesis of sacred texts and beliefs in order to justify their subjugation. I'm going to read that again. For centuries, Africans were dispossessed of their fullness of their ancient doctrinal and spiritual practices and imbued with the most diabolical doctrinal interpretation of other people's exegesis of sacred texts and beliefs in order to justify their subjugation. What that is saying, we as a people, before we encounter the Babylonians, at any point in history, we had our own concept of God. We had our own concept, if not of God, then of spiritual and earthly forces that guide our action. Whether it was through reverence of our ancestors, or reverence of plants, or reverence of a mythical creation of our own, we had our own. And by the fact that we had our own, we were living in a time and place of our own reality. Once we encountered the Babylonians, all that was taken away from us. All that was manipulated around a reward and punishment based system. Where today you find millions of Africans, the first people to walk the face of this earth. We worshiping all foreign gods today. Millions are Muslims, millions are Christians, millions are... We have all abandoned, whether willingly or unwillingly, our ancient doctrines and practice. And there is where, within the concept and cranium of the brain, is where the greatest colonization and exploitation takes place. Our mind no longer belongs to us. We hate and despise everything that has to do with our own originality. And by we taking on these philosophical and theological concepts of our subjugators, of our exploiters, that in turn is turned around to use as to justify our subjugation. If you allow yourself to be subjugated, then therefore you are responsible for your own subjugation. You are responsible for your own exploitation because you have allowed others to take full control of your brain and therefore your mind. So even today when we speak of ourselves as being Africans, it's a wild concept that, what about us is really Africa? Just our color? Just our color? And this criticism is equally applicable to the vast majority of people on the African continent. They are only Africans in name only. Their mind is still being colonialized even though they have liberated themselves politically to a certain degree to the land. Where they have driven out the European settlers, or they have driven out the Arabian settlers. But the brain and the mind is still colonialized, and therefore we are still truly not to ourselves. Look on the Rastafari movement 40, 50, 60 years ago. If you speak with a clear conscience, spirituality was never the central component of it. The central component of it was the liberation of Africa and the liberation of the African mind. 50 years later, we might as well stay in the church. Because a churchical doctrine, they know, a guide the movement. That's where the regression take place in the Rastafari movement. And to a certain degree, it's like the Rastafari movement don't even exist again. Because it is only individuals, brethren and Christians we are stand up, or try to stand up on that original foundation, which is what? Collective security for surety of the entire African race and the African continent. Remember when I said one time in one of them programs, Rastafari is not a spiritual movement with a liberation component to it. Rastafari is centrally a liberation movement with a spiritual component. That is what it is. Now to them come forward to Jamaica and come see the whole movement turn upside down. Man will get up and go in a temple and chant all day till him get exhausted and weary and tired and go and go lay down. The very same imposed doctrinal principle that was imposed upon people from the days of slavery. Them give you Sunday to go exhaust yourself and go lay down. 200 years later, here we are, claiming that we are a liberation movement. And now we do a meet in a circle and beat drum and bounce some weed and get exhausted and go lay down. That's why we're calling for this new faculty. We need to thumb this thing at the right way where it was one time. Centralize the liberation of Africa and the African people as a central core of the Rastafari movement and regulate the spiritual aspect to where it once was. Only an aspect of the movement. And the reason why spirituality becomes an aspect of the Rastafari movement is because so we can hold our vibes. So we can chant up certain vibes, so we can, when we're going buckle with a particular state of mind that aligns itself with true liberation. That is what it is about. So when I man listen, you see, when I man listen to badass out of England, you know, I'm not telling you straight up. Whether the virgin them can overstand him or don't overstand. I understand, so enough virgin don't understand badass. I fully get that. So that is not a criticism of the eye them. But one I think when I learn from badass, not only the fact that badass have an unorthodox way of looking and interpreting things, but within badass mental state is the centralization of the liberation of Africa and of the African continent. So whether or not badass say anything where I agree with or disagree with, that part they may agree with. This thing I get up and I jump on that circle and I beat jump and I look for individual salvation. That's not really part of the movement, family. That was never the central core of the movement. It's just like when you're going into battle. In every nation upon the face of the earth, every military forces and militia forces upon the face of the earth, whenever them going into battle fighting for their liberation, them have certain chance where them do. They get them mind and them brain in alliance with the action that is to be committed. And that is the person that is the reason and purpose to justify the chance that they do. But we as Rastafari, when we get up every day and go to the temple, go and chant down Babylon and beat down the drum and keep doing this and keep doing that in the circle, what state of mind are we trying to get in? that is in alliance with what actions are we contemplating? Ask a question a different way. What we do them chant there for? And when you don't do the chant and you walk out, I guess you feel more holy and you feel more righteous. Your state of mind has to be in alliance with how you intend to act. You don't prepare your mind in one way and you act in a different way. That is dissonance. That is where W.D. Du Bois will come up with as cognitive dissonance. You are holding different concepts and different thoughts in your mind that battling each other. And battling the way how you're acting and how you should be acting. And why is this? Because, like we say in the document, our original concept of life and liberty was wiped off our brain and was replaced by a Babylonian concept, Babylonian way of seeing things, Babylonian way of thinking, Babylonian way of eating, Babylonian way of dressing, Babylonian way of talking, using. Everything about us is of Babylon. And that's why we act and think and do the things that we do. And that is why the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary is here, as was commenced from the earlier days with the central liberation of the mind. Come on, tell you something. When you're speaking of African liberation and the liberation of Africa, you see that struggle? That struggle of a million different nuances to it, you know. That struggle of 1,000 ways to participate in that struggle. It's not all of us going up on the battlefield, literally and physically. It's not all of us going to contribute money to it. It's not all of us going to contribute spirituality to it. You understand? It's not all of us going to contribute academically to it. It's not all of us going to contribute in any one way. So when we speak of the Rastafari movement and its involvement in the African liberation struggle, for the liberation of the African people and the liberation of Africa, Rastafari must see its number one focus to be its responsibility to liberate the minds of Africans. That is the number one responsibility of the Rastafari movement, is to liberate the minds of the African people. With we taking up the mantle and the responsibility to say that is our domain, that is our responsibility, to liberate the minds of the African. Then when we liberate them and push them out, they go out there and get involved in all the other aspects of the overall liberation of the African people and the African continent. And that is the fundamental reason why we're going back to the establishment and the maintenance of the Rastafari Promise Key Seminary. This Rastafari Promise Key Seminary is not to save no individual soul. It's not to prepare no man for going on a mythical Zion up in the air. But it's to prepare a race and a people and a continent for the true liberation of our demographic self. That is our responsibility. That is where we will concentrate on. That is where we will turn out the leaders for the future struggles in this earth and this creation here. So we have no doubt, we are not wishy-washy in what is our purpose. We know our purpose is not established and not saving no individual soul for going to heaven and no Zion in no sky. If you as an individual particular objective is to go to heaven in some mythical place, you might as well stay in the church. Because they give you that for free every day. You can go in Islam and stay in that. Stay in all of the rest of them. If that you seek after. The Rastafari movement does not seek after no mythical reward when you go down in the ground. Zion for us is right here upon the earth, and this Zion has to be established physically, mentally, and spiritually as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. So we kind of wrap up this reasoning now, and we'll continue this reading from the doctrine next time. Is that make we focus, make we come to this understanding that Rasta has lost it way. 45 years ago, me go to Babylon, and when me return 45 years later, this thing has turned upside down. This thing has become an individual competition to see who can get through the gate of heaven faster than who. When I left and was imprisoned in Babylon, Rastafari movement was not about no individual salvation. It was about the salvation of the entire race. Right. So the concept is, if the whole entire race can't save, then there's no sense in one man being saved. Because one man cannot save and represent the entire race. If the entire African continent is not liberated, the black man, no matter which country he lives on the face of the earth, cannot be liberated. The sustenance of Europe, mentally, physically, spiritually, politically, economically, is based upon the subjugation of the African race for eternity. So there is no salvation in anything you get from them. They will give you nothing that can truly liberate you, nothing that can enhance your movement towards true liberation. And that will fit every race and every nation upon the face of the earth. That is the reality of the state of our existence. That who we are and that which we have, that was bequeathed to us by nature, is what the world needs to sustain themselves. So if a man knows there is only one loaf of bread, and that one loaf of bread can only sustain one life, but 10 men needs that bread, who you think each man going to fight to do with that bread? Each man going to fight to take control of that bread, whether that bread belongs to that individual man, woman, or child. It is no different geopolitically in this world. Europe is at this full understanding that the liberation of Africa and the liberation of the African people means that Europe will no longer be able to sustain their style and level of living. And because they have come to that recognition, they are the ones who are pushing this universal concept now. And that universal concept is going to come around at one time to say everything in Africa belongs to everybody. Because there is going to come a time when that doctrine is what will be applicable in order to sustain their existence. So whereas one time all the resources of the earth belongs to them, and they formulated a philosophical doctrine to do that by saying basically that anywhere there is resources upon the face of the earth, the intelligent man has the right to commandeer it. But that doctrine no longer can hold this world and sustain them. So they have now evolved this humanitarian doctrine, where everything is everything and everything is everybody. But that doctrine did not exist when they did not need that doctrine for their own sustenance. So today when I say Rastaman are running and talk about save the world and save everybody and everybody are this and everybody must wait, you're a fool. You're bought into a doctrine that is going to lead to your own demise. Well, you know, open up the house so you're living at to everybody. We don't tell all of the people and we walk past downtown when you live nowhere. Based on one humanity for coming at your house. Marcus Garvey tell me, you know, a man shall not allow you into his house and allow you to commandeer it. And when you understand philosophical concept upon the face of this earth, you will come to the realization that all philosophy and all ideology, whether it's economically, politically, spiritually, all of these principles and disciplines are there to serve a particular person and a particular group of people forward as long as it can work. These principles are not universal principles. These are principles that are transactional. People preach certain doctrine because they benefit from that doctrine, except us as Africans. We preach doctrines and philosophies and ideologies of principles that don't even benefit us. We preach it because it sounds good. Oh, wonderful it sounds to get up and talk about let us save all humanity. Oh, wonderful it is to talk about universal principles in this and universal doctrines in that. And we are here to... Nah, man. Those are just clutches that have been placed upon your brain to make you more exploitable. And that is where we get today. So again, brethren and sisters, move progress forward. Incorporated Forged by Time Limited, we have gotten the seal approved. We have gotten the bank accounts approved. We are moving forward. We are trying to make the appropriate link so we can fully establish dealing with youthful delinquency and the crime throughout the society. As well as trying to set up the tour so I can do some travelings and lecture. And I've received some very excellent advice from some brothers and sisters on how to move forward. You understand? And those advice are well taken and those advice will be heeded because they make rational sense to me. So, until then, brothers and sisters, stay strong. See the number. You can call Forged by Time. Anyone have any assistance they want to give, any financial support, any doctrinal support, any volunteer time, whatever. Anything that can move the dreams and aspiration forward is welcome. And don't forget, the Tankor Union that is located at 6 East Parade. They might look volunteer because they might try to organize black people in Jamaica. And them kind of take up as one of them mantle or to deal with the rewriting of the Jamaican Constitution. And they have their recommendation that they are putting forward. And they are short of manpower. They short of skilled people. They short of people with the ability to assist the union, Tankor Union, to go so they can better represent the underclass populace that's in Jamaica. So once again, whoever can contribute on that way there, it is welcome to them. You understand? You just have to go up on the internet and plug in Tankor Union and you see it come up. You can also plug in what them call the Jamaica Unity Alliance. The Jamaica Unity Alliance is really a conglomerate of different organizations who are trying to stand up against the present process that being employed to rewrite the Jamaican Constitution. They want the general public to have a say. So just go up on the internet and look up Jamaica Unity Alliance, of which Tankor Union is one member of, I think, 5 or 6 different members who have formed the Jamaica Unity Alliance. So it's a positive thing. You know, look into it, do your own investigation, and say if you want to give them some volunteer time or some resources or whatever. So you can give them that plug there on Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio. So until then, next time, brethren and sisters, hopefully the next program will be presented in a more shorter time than the 2 weeks that it took me to this, because like I said earlier, I was doing volunteer work and it was well contributed time to society. And again, please support Forged by Time book. That is my main source of income. It is also tied to Forged by Time Limited Corporate. Everything where I do is a subsidiary of Forged by Time Limited. Every single thing, the seminary, the tours that being planned, the plans to get into the prison system, everything that I do is under Forged by Time Limited. So until then, brethren and sisters, one God, one aim, one destiny, peace, love, and unity. Stay strong, stay in the struggle. And again, the number, call the number. Whoever want to link me, or whoever just want to link the corporation, or whatever, see the link there. The funny thing is, people from all over the world did try to link me, but I wasn't ready for the link with a lot of people. And the main reason why I wasn't ready, I did not want to make too much individual link, but to have most of the association take place through the Forged by Time Limited Corporation. So every approach where we make, everything where we do is structure above board and serves a purpose. So see the number there, the item can reach out, make the link, and everything solid. Brethren and sisters, and you notice with enough of the comment them when I get forward, it's mostly from the brethren there. I want to hear from the sister in them, you know. Yeah man, I want to hear from the sister in them. Because the sister in them have a way where them lay back, but them have great brain where them can apply to this struggle. And trust me, sisters, me and one of them man, they will talk about woman this and woman that and woman second. Me not believe me not with them clown thing there. See, woman are fundamental part of this struggle. History has shown us that. So step up and make me hear your voice. Let me get to know opinion. Well appreciated. It will be read and it will be, you understand? So divine's blessing to everyone. This is Gillie Priest of Gillie Priest Revolutionary Radio. Until next time, blessed. And like the brethren them say now, manners and honors, and do the maths. Bless.